Hello.
Our story begins inside the reactor shaft on Starkiller Base. In front of Kylo Ren, down a long catwalk, above a chasm that seemed endless, was his father. A million flashes of memories passed through Ben's mind. He saw the man who raised him, and Han Solo began walking towards him. Kylo was standoffish. He knew what he was supposed to do. He was supposed to do what Snoke told him to do. Kill his father. Cut himself off from the light. Submit himself to the dark side. But Ben was never truly a part of this. The claim that he destroyed Luke's temple was kind of false. The turn to the dark side was so incomplete. He forced himself down a path he believed he was set to follow. The dark side called to him as it did his grandfather, his uncle, and even his mother. Ben was enamored with his grandfather, but all those voices in his head, they couldn't be him. He was gone, wasn't he? Kylo moved back and forth in his own mind of where he sat. His heart rate began to pick up as his father crossed the catwalk towards him. Han Solo knew this risk. He understood that in doing this he could be risking his own life, but he'd do anything for his son. He needed Ben to see that. Their relationship was always rocky, and it wasn't that Han was a bad father by any means. He just had a tough way of communicating his love for his son. Who could blame Han? It's who he was, and who he is. He was a smuggler raised from the scum on Corellia, forged by an Imperial Navy in how to be a good pilot, before he set off on his own adventure with Chewie. Everyone he ever loved betrayed him until he met Chewie, and eventually after him, Luke and Leia. Some habits are hard to break, and he couldn't break free from those restraints. Han got up to his son and looked at him, asking Ben to remove his helmet. Kylo challenged his father, asking what he expected to see under the mask, and his father responded, telling him that he would see the face of his son. Ben took this. He lived with it for a short moment before he slowly removed his helmet. Han was a short distance away from Ben, so they had room to close in on each other. When the helmet was removed, Han looked at his boy all grown up. When Ben joined Luke's temple, he was 10 years old. Now he's a grown man, almost 30 years old. It was a hard moment for Han. It had been years since Ben's fall from grace. He had seen his son years leading up to his fall to the dark side, which only happened a couple years prior to this. Han took a deep breath as he listened to Ben tell him that his son was gone, because Ben Solo was weak and foolish like his father. Han knew this to be untrue. He knew that this was the teachings of Snoke, a man who had befriended Ben when he was just a boy. The clone of Palpatine used the same moves that the ancient Sith Lord used on Ben's grandfather, and it worked to perfection, exposing the inconsistencies in the Jedi Order, forcing a powerful boy, a boy who knew he was too powerful, to become reliant on the dark side and trust his power in the darkness. Han closed in on his son, telling Ben that his son was alive. Kylo teetered, expressing that Snoke was wise, before Han moved in another couple steps, telling his son that Snoke was taking advantage of him for his power. Han knew it. His son was strong with the Force. How could he not be? Ben's mother and uncle were the children of one of the most powerful beings ever created by the Force. Han told his son that when Snoke gets what he wants, he'll get rid of him. He could see the light reflect off of Ben's face. There was a glow of red and a glow of blue, as Han expressed that Ben knew it to be true, that Snoke would get rid of him the moment he had his power. Silence filled the air between father and son. This moment, a lifetime in the works for Ben. A moment of true vulnerability with his father. He wanted to go back, but he was also so afraid to move on. He didn't know where he wanted to go. He wasn't consumed by power. He was trying to appease a party, whether it be Snoke or Han. He wanted to make someone proud of him. He wanted to pick a side that would help. He knew he couldn't kill his father, no matter what he did. He needed someone's help for that. He told his father that it was too late, and Han quickly stood between those words that left his son's mouth, telling him to come home with him, before a silent but effective line came out of his mouth, telling his son that we miss you. Han, Leia, Chewie, they all missed him. These words sat in the mind of Kylo Ren for a moment. Tears washed over his eyes and his throat tensed up. Ben Solo, in his mind, wanted to go home. He wanted to be with his family again. He didn't want this. He never did. A flash of memories running over his mind. The night the temple was destroyed, he never wanted that. He didn't want to be a part of that destruction. He was forced into it. When the temple was destroyed, he created a forced storm. Through his fear and anger, and when the temple was blown to pieces, he tried to rectify his mistakes by running in before another explosion threw him from his feet. Ben wasn't able to make up for it, before Snoke's voice told him that it wasn't his fault, rather the Jedi's. Ben returned to the present. He thought of the words to say, and all he could get out in front of his father was his truest emotions. He said he was being torn apart. The dark side was too much to bear. He didn't want it. Even though it gave him so much power, it was never something he wanted. On another note, he could go further into the dark side if he asked his father to help him. Ben told his father that he knew what he needed to do, but he didn't know if he had the strength to do it. He asked if his dad could help. Han, without a moment of hesitation, told him that he would as he stepped in closer to his son. No matter what it was, he would help. The helmet of Kylo Ren dropped to the ground, and Ben unlashed his lightsaber and put it out in front of him, between him and his father. As he held the lightsaber in his two hands, with Han's hand in the middle, he thought about what he could do here. His dad was helping him. Either way he went, his dad would be the one to help him through it. Because Han Solo knew that no matter which way he went, his son would come back. If his son killed him, he wouldn't be able to live with that mistake. If his son joined him, then he could make things right. Ben let go of the lightsaber and Han held the weapon. He moved the lightsaber away from his son and looked into Ben's eyes. There he was. He was there for the entire time. But this time, for real, he wasn't gone. Ben Solo looked at his father, and the lightsaber was tossed off the edge of the platform. Ben smiled at his dad, and in a short moment of true bonding, they hugged each other out, as the sun that Starkiller was draining was extinguished. Ben and Han moved away from the catwalk, as Ben told his father to go. He couldn't return to the Resistance because of the crimes he had committed. He was partially responsible for the destruction of the Hosnian System, which killed hundreds of billions of people. Ben told his father that he would try and kill Snoke. If he could do that, then he could begin to make things right. Ben began to question his decisions, but he couldn't stop. He couldn't go back to the dark side. The power of fear controlled him, and if it meant he disappointed the disembodied voice of his grandfather, then so be it. He couldn't stay here. It's not who he was to sit in the dark side, to be consumed by something that was so clearly not a part of who he was. Han wished his son the best of luck, tossing him a communication device so they could stay in contact with each other once he returned to Snoke's throne. Han knew that his son was right. Ben couldn't just return to the Resistance. He had done so many heinous things over the last couple years, and to act like he hadn't would be outrageous behavior from Leia and Han especially. He could make things right, but returning to the known galaxy wouldn't be like just flipping a switch. Rey, Finn, Chewie, and Han evacuated the reactor shaft before blowing a hole in the side. They were able to get to the Falcon and help assist in Dameron's assault on the base. While at the same time, Ben got to his TIE fighter and prepared to evacuate the base. The First Order was already preparing for their counterattack on the rebels. It was clear that Starkiller Base was lost, and Hux informed Captain Kennedy to prime his dreadnought. They'd be deploying over Dakar in due time. The Falcon, alongside the remaining Resistance fighters, returned to the Resistance headquarters to prepare for an evacuation. As mentioned before the battle, the First Order learned of the location of the Resistance base, so they had to prepare the evacuation. Luckily, the Resistance flagship, the Raddus, was present over the star system, along with a couple of other support vessels the Resistance could use to escape. Before the First Order could get to Dakar, Leia sent Han, Chewie, and Rey to retrieve Luke. Rey was looking for a teacher, and Han and Chewie were trying to get their friend. Shortly after they left, the First Order arrived, and the Resistance had to make a run. Not after Poe Dameron had the Resistance attack the Dreadnought, which cost them their entire bomber fleet. On the Supremacy, a galaxy away, Ben Solo was preparing to meet up with his master. Hux debriefed Supreme Leader Snoke, and they were tracking the Resistance through hyperspace. It was only a matter of time until they were caught and destroyed. Snoke could sense that Ben didn't kill Han, and he could feel it through the Force, so perhaps the girl would be more useful to him. Snoke was very unaware that his crater was still lurking in the unknown regions. However, he would use Ben's return to the light to expose the darkness that resided inside of the girl. He could feel it, and while he had no inclination to believe she belonged to the lineage of the former Dark Lord of the Sith, he knew that she had a power. This was displayed in her ability to resist Ren, though if his theories were correct, if they were in fact a dyad in the Force, then it would explain why she was able to resist him with so little training. If they were a dyad, Snoke believed that Ben awakened the Force within her. On Ahch-To, Rey arrived to search for Luke. Han and Chewie expressed that they would wait down here, believing that Rey would actually be able to sway Luke to come down to the Falcon so they could leave. Luke was standing on the top of the mountain. When he turned to see Rey, he was surprised to say the least. And then she showed his father's lightsaber to him. Luke, in a quick moment of a reaction, tossed the blade away from himself. He had cut himself off from the Force, and he wanted nothing to do with the fight. He realized what his fear of the darkness could do. His reaction that night had nothing to do with his nephew, rather his response to the dark side of the Force itself. This is the same fear that forced him away from Dagobah years before, and the same fear that forced him to beat his father within an inch of his life a year after that. This fear for Luke wasn't a fear of Ben, rather a fear of losing everything he cared about, and cutting himself off from the Force could aid the galaxy in moving on from the problems the Jedi created. All Luke knew was the legacy of their failure and hypocrisy. Obi-Wan and Yoda's lies to him when he was a student, and how their fall was insinuated by a conflict that ravaged the entire galaxy. With someone asking for him to be their teacher, he couldn't do it. He walked away from her, leaving her with a sense of confusion. Luke went to his hut and began folding his robes and putting them away. His door was busted down by Chewbacca and Han. The two of them moved into the hut, with Rey trailing behind them. Han and Luke began talking. It had been a long time since they'd seen each other, probably a little longer than the last time he saw Leia. Han told Luke that it wasn't his fault. Luke always blamed himself for everything that happened that night, but Han and Leia never blamed him. It was Snoke that was twisting the dark side inside of their son. And while the sentiment was nice, Luke didn't believe it. Han came in and asked to speak with Luke alone for a moment, which he got, and Han told his older friend that Ben returned from the dark side. He was saved, and he returned to the light. Luke couldn't believe it, and truthfully, it made sense. He cut himself off of the Force, so he wouldn't be able to feel it if it happened. While Han was trying to convince Luke that he wasn't to blame for what happened, Rey stumbled outside the hut, and she turned to see Ben solo. He was very dissociated. She obviously wasn't happy with him for trying to probe her mind or knocking her out on Takodana, but she was playing nice because he didn't kill Han Solo. She asked what happened to him. Ben was stumbling over himself, really not understanding what was happening. Of course, they were both confused, but it turned out that this Force vision or call with each other was being created by a force outside of them. It also didn't help that Snoke was twisting Ben's memories, trying to force him down the dark path again. The two of them had a conversation that reflected the conversation Luke and Han were having inside the hut. Rey was trying to help Ben remember what happened on Starkiller, and Han was telling Luke about what happened on Starkiller. The two of them actively working to assist the individual they believed would be a greater assistance to their cause. Rey still not believing she had any place in the story, and Han remembering what Luke had accomplished above Endor. In Snoke's ship, he could feel the power emanating from the girl before it became readily apparent to him that his greatest opposition wasn't Resistance, rather it was someone she was related to. Instead of continuing his pursuit of the Resistance, Snoke took the supremacy and departed to the Mustafar system. He felt a call through the Force, and he needed to investigate if it was real or not. The reason he felt this call was because of Rey. Something about her drew from a power not seen in decades. Snoke had no memory of being a clone. He believed he was just simply a sentient being from the get-go. There was a continued pursuit of the Raddus for the Resistance, which led Finn and Rose to jump ship and make their way for Canto Bight. However, Admiral Ackbar was still in command because a wave of TIE fighters didn't get to the bridge without Kylo Ren leading them. His superior piloting techniques would have aided in the destruction of the Raddus' bridge. However, Poe was able to jump into his ship and blow them out of the sky before they could do any damage to the ship. Thanks to Maz, Ackbar approved Finn and Rose's mission to Canto Bight. It was incredibly important for their escape from the First Order. On Oct 2, Han was able to at the very least convince Luke to leave the island behind, while Rey lost her connection to Ben. This is because the supremacy arrived over Mustafar, and he was sent down to Vader's castle to retrieve the Wayfinder. The Wayfinder was just below where Vader's castle was, and it was protected by a number of individuals, but Ben without a lightsaber couldn't do much in the way of destroying them, so Captain Phasma and a grouping of stormtroopers went down with him, and he was able to locate the Wayfinder. He attempted to destroy it, believing that giving it to Snoke would only be bad for the collective galaxy. Before he could destroy it, he was stunned by Phasma, who took the Wayfinder to the Supreme Leader herself. With the Wayfinder, Snoke was able to get himself to Exegol. At the same time, the Falcon returned to the Resistance fleet, which was only down to one of the support ships. Everything else was destroyed aside from the Raddus. Ackbar at this point was making a beeline for Crate, in the hopes that the Resistance could deposit its troops on the planet. On Canto Bight, Finn and Rose were able to find a codebreaker in DJ and get back to the Resistance fleet, though by the time they returned they had to pick the right Resurgent-class destroyer, because one of them was using a tracking device on the Resistance fleet, though as they were making their way to one of the ships, Ackbar redirected them to the surface of Crate. They decided it'd be better to evacuate the Raddus. With a cast of support ships leaving the Raddus behind, Ackbar would pilot the ship until the Resistance was safe. Right as they entered the atmosphere of Crate, the Raddus jumped to hyperspace, leaving the First Order fleet to follow them. They had no clue the Resistance jumped ship and traced Ackbar down to destroy him. On Exegol, Snoke ventured down to the surface with his Praetorian guard, dragging his student along with him. Truthfully, Snoke didn't care for Ben, but he recognized that if Ben was with him, then he couldn't be turned into an overwhelming powerhouse. Upon their entry, Ben and Snoke could feel the grueling nature of the dark side. Snoke was surprised the further he got in. He saw mangled versions of his body in different tubes and such. A voice called out to Snoke, almost in a prideful manner, as if Snoke was a student. It was his creator. Once Snoke saw the hollowed-out body of the former Emperor of the Fallen Empire, he prepared for war. He told Snoke that he had done well in bringing the First Order into power. However, Palpatine had no interest in using Snoke as an apprentice. Snoke also didn't like this. The two of them began a battle with the Force, which for Leia allowed her to feel the return of the Dark Lord. Luke, who was still returning from his cutoff from the Force, could feel it as well, though neither of them could believe it. But it wasn't just because of Palpatine using the Force for the first time since his apparent death. It was because Ben was calling out for help. He was giving them a path to Exegol, but he didn't know how to get there. Without a Wayfinder or a Wayfinder leaving a path behind, it was nearly impossible to get to Exegol. The fight of the Force was decisively in favor of the former Sith Lord, but with all of his physical limitations, he was no match for Snoke. In the end, Sidious was killed by his clone, which only ruined the strength of the Final Order. The Final Order was trapped under the ice of Exegol, and without someone to assist them in their rise from the ice, they were trapped. Though with Sidious's death, the Sith were extinguished. Snoke was by no means a Sith, and Ben was even further from, which led to the destruction of the Sith Eternal, though the Final Order remained, and Snoke had a means to take control over it. While Snoke was distracted, Ben broke free from the Praetorian Guard and got himself to the Wayfinder so he could transmit the way to Exegol to the Resistance. Though without a way to escape the planet, he had to find a way to survive the guards, Snoke and any other Sith loyalists. Though he found something peculiar. The Sith fleet that sat underneath the surface could be utilized, so he made a move on it. On Crate, Leia was sending out requests for reinforcements to allies spread throughout the Outer Rim. With the destruction of the Hosnian System, no one wanted to challenge the First Order. While it was widely unknown that anyone had beaten Starkiller Base, people were extremely fearful of the rise of this First Order. It took a spark to reignite the flame of the Resistance, and a desire for peace. Without that spark, the Resistance had to take their transports off of Crate and head for Allied space, which would be in Coruscant Sector. Without the Hosnian System or the First Order reaching into the core, there's a chance Leia's message could become more widespread than it was out here on Crate. At the same time, Ben infiltrated a Ziostock-class Star Destroyer. His plan was simple: do what had to be done. He had his father's swagger, and he moved with finesse down to the vessels. By the time Snoke realized Ben was gone, it was far too late. He forced the destroyer to target the planet of Exegol, which was a sacrifice, but one he was willing to make. It completely eradicated the Final Order fleet, the home of the Sith, Snoke, and the strength of the First Order. Of course, there were other fleets around the galaxy, but aside from the Hux, there was no leadership. Leia felt it immediately, as did Rey and Luke. There was a certain level of pain that came from this, but both parents had at least some peace of mind that came with the end of Kylo Ren. Their son Ben was saved, from himself and from Snoke. He at the very least died, bringing a chance for hope to the galaxy, and as heartbreaking as it may have been for his parents, Leia had to ensure his death wasn't in vain. She would send a message out to the entire galaxy, informing them of the fall of Starkiller Base, and how the Resistance was able to rise up against a superior force. This move would assist people in their rise against the First Order, and within weeks the collective people would rise up against a fractured structure. The sacrifices of the victory against the Empire were never in vain, as the collective people in the galaxy were ready to go and fight against the First Order, and anyone who tried to take their freedom away. Luke, who was still reluctant towards the idea of training Jedi ever again, would assist Rey in her first steps forward. After he gave her the information for the texts of the original Jedi, he gave her a couple lessons before setting her off on her own. When she eventually returned, she was taken in by Han and Leia. Leia would tell her about her lineage, as Leia could sense that Palpatine was within her. Leia would continue Rey's training, and Luke would eventually join in to help her on her journey to become a Jedi and restarting an Order. By the time her journey was complete, the First Order was extinguished, and while her other half of the dyad was gone, she would continue her journey with his sacrifice never having been forgotten. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to Galvin Gaming, Tristan, Darth Revan, Pimp Daddy Bane, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Mathematic Studios, Anakin003, Lemon Knight, Rex the Wolf, then I have 3 first names, Dark Saint 46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. If you want to support me in other ways, go check out the Patreon. Otherwise, smash that like button. Let's talk about the story real quick. So this is shorter than my typical stories, and that is kind of intentional. It kind of passes through things quickly. The reality is, most people are just going to say, click on this video, and be like, I hate the sequels, and that's fine, you have your own opinion, but it's not necessary, you know? They've been out for 5 years, 4 or 5 years, and as someone who likes the sequels, I do want to make content for them and for fans of them, because they exist. And so the intention of doing these is like every other what if. It's not me trying to be better than George Lucas or anybody else, it's just me making a what if. But more or less, the point of the story was kind of highlighting the bond between Han and Ben. There's a great video on Cinema Therapy. They talk about a lot of things in the sequels, and they talk about Han and Ben's relationship, or just the story of Kylo Ren in general, and it's really interesting to do a character study on him, as well as the other characters in the sequels themselves, but that's what I was kind of going off of. I wanted to establish that bond between Han and Ben, because I feel like Ben didn't hate his father, he just didn't exactly they didn't like mesh, if that makes sense. Like Han probably wasn't the most vulnerable individual with his son, and so that kind of creates a little discrepancy for the two of them. And I think like touching on that in this story was kind of fun. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.